What is up, grinders? We got week 4 of lines and lineups. Holden Kushner here. We got Dan Bach from RotoGrinders, Sharp Side, whatever you want to call it. Wonderful content there. And Kevin Rogers from VegasInsider.com, by the way, who is just on fire this year. Did your guaranteed pick work again?
My guaranteed pick was the Carolina Panthers beating Arizona. We know the Cardinals are terrible defensively, but I'm going to be the first one to say I did not see 4 touchdowns coming from Kyle Allen. But I thought Carolina going on the road and no Cam Newton would be very beneficial for them. So that one worked out. I had the Bears last night, too, as my guarantee against the Redskins. So that was I'm not breaking ground with that one.
No, even I could have picked that one.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say, oh, that was such a brilliant pick. But I will say before we get started that the Miami Dolphins are definitely going to be in a dogfight for that number 1 pick this year.
They shouldn't be, but I guess they are. Dan,
There's a
how
lot
are
of bad
you?
teams, Holden. There's a
How
lot of bad
you doing, buddy? What's going on with you? How was the weekend of DFS?
I was good. I mean, if you watched the show last week, I told you Kyle Allen. I told you Mike Evans. I told you Evan Ingram. I mean, you played those 3 guys in your cash lineups. You were a lock to end up hitting the cash line. So it was a great week for DFS, and excited to get rolling here, week 4 already. It's here.
I just went a different way than you did to get my things done. I went Waller and Keenan Allen, so that worked out too.
That was all right, but we didn't talk about those games, so I can't.
I know,
I led you the wrong way.
You were wrong about something.
Oh, I definitely was wrong about a lot, but that's for a different story.
Yeah. All right, here we go, guys. We got New England Buffalo, 5 games. New England Buffalo, the Rams, and the Buccaneers. We'll talk about Dallas, New Orleans, Kansas City, Detroit, and Philadelphia, Green Bay. Now, let's just get right into this here with the New England and Buffalo. This Buffalo team, they can play some defense, man. Josh Allen has not been as careless with the football so far this season. I'm seeing where the line opened up at 6, and now it's sitting at 7 with New England laying 7 on the road. And also the game totals, it started at 44. I'm seeing about 42 and a half. K-Raj, I mean, this Patriots team, man, they are just unstoppable to start the season. Ho-hum. Antonio Brown comes and goes. So let's find Edelman. Then Edelman gets hurt. Let's go find Josh Gordon. If they can get Sony Michel going, they're going to be just fine. But the Patriots, it's tough to go against them even on the road at that line. What's some of your analysis there?
Well, Holden, this is a series that's been owned by the Patriots. 28-3 the last 31 meetings between these two teams, and 2 of those, Tom Brady wasn't even playing. One of them was Jacoby Brissett during the 4-game suspension a few years ago, and I believe one of the other wins from Buffalo, Brady played the first series in Week 17. It didn't even matter, and Buffalo ended up winning in Foxborough. New England's won the last 7 in Buffalo. So what's interesting is New England has had I think more success almost in Buffalo than in New England in this series. And Buffalo's been very good so far. We can't take away the 3-0 mark, but we also have to look at their opponents, the Giants, the Jets, and the Bengals, the Giants with Eli, the Jets with Sam Darnold, but still, we know the Jets aren't very good. And Cincinnati, who now has covered twice so far on the road this season. But now you're facing the Patriots, and I just think that it's tough to take the points here. Buffalo last year, guys, 3 times they were a home underdog of 7 or more, lost all 3 by double digits to the Chargers, the Bears, and the Patriots on that Monday night game in which there was the pick 6. The Bills actually hung in that game for a bit. The Patriots opened it up at the end, but I think it's just tough to make an argument here for Buffalo. New England's just, they're the better team, but I think New England here takes care of business.
Dan, from a DFS perspective then, on the Patriots side, Brady's just seemed very consistent. Looks like he's going to cost a little too much for cash, I suppose. Edelman, if he's fine, if he comes back, he had to leave a little early. I think it was a chest injury. And again, Josh Gordon. The running game has not gotten going. James White was gone. His wife had a kid. So congratulations to him. Rex Burkhead came in, put up some big numbers. I wonder if Burkhead is going to be viable again with James White coming back. And then on the Bills side, I mean, if Devin Singletary is healthy, and that's a big if, is he an option? Is Josh Allen always an option because he can run?
Yeah, this isn't the sexiest spot for DFS. I mean, you mentioned on Brady. I think he's too high, 3rd highest price quarterback there on DraftKings, 5th on FanDuel. And he just doesn't have a high enough floor with legitimately zero rushing ability in this matchup here. And it's a tough matchup too. Buffalo's defense is legit. So I think this is a definite stay away on the quarterback side of things. The running back angle is a little bit interesting. Sony Michel's such a tease. Dude, first drive, goes down, scores a touchdown, and then goes on for 9 carries, 11 yards the rest of the game. And, he's actually gets a little bit of a bump with James Devlin being out because he's the guy who would steal those goal line touches. But I just don't think we can go there, unfortunately. Last year, he had one good game against this defense and one that was ho-hum. I think we just got to pass on this running game for the most part. The one guy I'm a little bit interested in, I love the narratives. I love the baby narratives. And James White, in one matchup versus this team last year, had 10 receptions for 79 yards. So on a site like DraftKings, where it's a full point per reception at 4,900, he could be somewhat playable. I could see them call his number a little bit, but with Burkhead still back there, pretty crowded backfield. And then the wide receivers. Josh Gordon should have had a touchdown last week, didn't convert, but this secondary for the Bills is legit. Tre'Davious White didn't quite go the shadow coverage on him last time they played. But I think the one kind of sneaky spot to look at is the other wide receiver spot. One, Edelman. Is he going to play? Early in the week for us to say. If he does play, he had 10 targets in like a half last week. So Brady's going to look his way. If he doesn't, then you got a guy named Jacoby Myers who played 80% of the snaps last week and was a superstar in the preseason. He's min salary on FanDuel, $3,500 on DraftKings. And then last name I need to talk about is going to be Dorsett. Philip Dorsett has absolutely crushed it when given opportunity, and with no Antonio Brown there, maybe no Edelman, he's one guy you can look at. It's got a pretty decent price tag, especially over on DraftKings, $1,200 cheaper than Gordon on DraftKings. So those are the guys I'm looking at. Nothing really on the Buffalo side.
Now, even if they're behind, a guy like Cole Beasley, who could get a lot of targets, maybe on a PPR site, no?
Maybe. Gore is the one guy who he actually made it last week based on his salary, but he's got zero upside. So I actually think it's going to be a grinded out game. The total on this one's 42.5, and we've seen how good New England's offense has been. I think it's a low scoring, grinded out game. And unlike Kevin, I actually think Buffalo might be able to cover that number here. They got a lot of momentum here, 3-0. We talk about the bad teams they've played, but New England's played the Jets without Darnold, the Dolphins, and a Pittsburgh team, which is clearly not very good this year. So even though I think their defense is good, they haven't played great competition either.
Hey, Kevin, what do you think about the total here? 44 to open, 42.5, 42, depending on where you go.
I agree with Dan that it's just very hard to make an argument for a very high scoring game considering, I understand New England hasn't played anybody good, but the defense has not given up an offensive touchdown yet. The Jets scored a special teams touchdown and a defensive touchdown in the game on Sunday. So we got to note that. And also with Buffalo, they gave up a defensive touchdown to the Jets in week 1, and they've been pretty strong defensively. So, yeah, you got who you have on your schedule, but they have stepped up defensively. And when you look at New England, they could win this game 27-17. They could win it 27-14 and still cover the 7 and it not be a total high scoring game. And we know we're not going to see New England score 40 points on Buffalo. We know that's not going to happen, but also I don't know if we're going to see Buffalo score 3 touchdowns either in this game. So we could see these teams maybe in the low 20s or the winner in the low 20s. But it's just hard to ignore the defensive numbers so far with these two teams.
I think you're muted.
Dan, I think you brought it up, and we can go again as far as the total here and the two defenses. I'm still on the New England defense, even though that schedule, I'm right there with you. But I think the Buffalo defense might have something in store. And while New England has run, has just run all over Buffalo, this might be a good spot to look at the under. I listen, everybody hates betting the under. It's tough, but this might be a way to go, guys. And I just wonder, K-Raj kind of sounded like you're on that side. Dan, it sounds like you're on that side too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an underplay, and it's really hard when you have the GOAT Tom Brady, under center there. But in Buffalo, it's going to be a really great environment. I mean, those fans have got to be as hyped as ever, starting 3-0. So I think it's going to be a tougher spot than maybe Kevin does for the Patriots here.
All right, so we got Tampa Bay at the Rams. This will be a 4:00 Eastern time game. The Rams, 9.5 is what we're looking at. 9.5 or 10, depending on where you shop. Kevin, we could get to the total in just a little bit, and I think that's fascinating too. But 9.5 points here. A Rams offense that really hasn't gotten going yet. And it's kind of funny. You read the papers or you read online. There's no papers anymore. You read on, hey, why don't you turn on your cassette player? That's what reading a newspaper is like. Anyways, the Rams offense, the media is crushing them. The fans are crushing. Oh, this offense should be going more. Gurley has struggled. Their offense has not been as high flying. They're going to bust open someday. It might be this week. 9.5, 10 points, though. Are the Rams that much better than Tampa Bay?
Definitely a lot of points to swallow with the Rams this week. A couple things. Number one, with LA, by far the most points they've laid this year. They haven't laid more than 4 points in any game so far. I mean, these have all been short lines, a short line against New Orleans back in week 2. And obviously, you can throw that out with Drew Brees getting hurt early on in that game. And even the Carolina game, that got steamed down to 1.5 that the Rams were laying, and they held off Carolina in that week 1 game. You look at Tampa Bay, and the defense was pretty good the first 2 weeks. The defense wasn't good against Daniel Jones on Sunday as he ate them up with 2 touchdown passes and 2 touchdown runs, especially that one at the end. So you think the Buccaneers would try to rebound here after blowing an 18-point lead, a game they should not have lost to the Giants this past Sunday. The Rams 4-2 ATS last year as a double-digit favorite. The only loss they had, they went 5-1 straight up to Nick Foles and the Eagles on that Sunday night game at home. And past that, LA takes care of their business. Granted, they didn't cover a few times in those games. Tampa Bay's been a good underdog recently, at least dating back to last year. They covered the Thursday night game against Carolina in week 2, 5-1 against the spread, their last 6 in the underdog role. But also put this one out there. You include that Carolina win. Tampa Bay now 3-16, their last 19 road games, and 2 of those wins came with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. So, you just got to put that in perspective. That are you trusting Jameis Winston here to win at LA? And Holden, you mentioned the offense hasn't really busted out. Is that going to happen for the Rams this week? But for Tampa Bay, I guess I just go to value that you're a 6-point underdog against Carolina. They had a great showing there, even though Cam Newton, we know, was hurt. Jared Goff has not been fantastic this year. The offense, it's taken a little bit of time for them to get going. But to get this many points, though, the Rams coming off a nationally televised win over Cleveland, maybe getting the points is the way to go.
DFS perspective here. Kevin, we'll come back to you for the total in just a second. So Tampa Bay lit up the Giants last week. The Giants are just an absolute sieve. Hey, by the way, the Redskins Giants, I think this is going to be a cornucopia of fantasy goodness this week. But sticking with this game, starting on the Tampa Bay side. No, Dan, I cannot trust Jameis Winston. But in a game, if the Rams get going here and they come out to a big lead, it's not like Arians is going to pull them. We've seen Winston play a couple of times. I'm always gun-shy playing Jameis Winston, but is this a spot we should feel comfortable, at least slightly comfortable with him?
No, definitely not. I mean, I'm on the opposite side of Kevin here again. I mean, I think this is a Rams smash spot here. I mean, this is an offense that hasn't, like you said, hasn't really put the pedal down yet and have a big explosive offensive game. And with a total of 50 and a spread of about 9-10, you're looking at the second highest implied team total on the slate behind the Chargers, who of course had the Dolphins this week. And this is really tough travel, going from Tampa all the way to LA. So Jared Goff, he's yet to eclipse 2 touchdowns in the game this season. Feels like a lock to happen in this spot. He's 6.3 on DraftKings, 7.7 on FanDuel. And the problem with him is, in tournaments when we're trying to build correlated lineups, like who do we pair with him? If you had Cooper Kupp this past week, he did pretty well. 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards. Cooks has had touchdowns in back-to-back games. But you almost wonder if it's a get-right spot maybe for Robert Woods. He's the cheapest of the 3. So, it's easy to mix and match if you're mass multi-entering in tournaments. But I think you could actually play Goff, as we like to call him the DFS world, naked in cash games and not pair him up with anybody because it's just hard to pinpoint where that production is going to go in this offense. And one sneaky name is Gerald Everett. I talked about Ingram last week and how he was ready to explode against this Todd Bowles defense. Well, here we are again. They still didn't guard the tight end last week. Everett, he's near minimum on DraftKings, minimum on FanDuel. Only if Tyler Higbee is out is he remotely viable. And even then, it's kind of like a GPP 1% owned type guy. Gurley, no interest there. Tampa, they're actually pretty good versus the run. They kind of bottled up Saquon last week, so he might fall in the end zone, but it's a spot that I'm not looking. The Rams D, though, on the other hand, absolutely. I mean, Winston is a turnover machine. You've got obviously Aaron Donald, who is a guy who can put a ton of pressure on that quarterback. So, Tampa, I loved them last week, and there might be some garbage points to be had for, Godwin and Evans in a run back situation on a game stack, but overall not super excited about those guys. The one value spot I do see a little bit is OJ Howard. He went 4 for 66 last week, had a ton of looks in that offense, and I think they want to get him going a little bit. And I think we started to see that last week. So he's going to find the end zone sooner or later. He's under 4K on DraftKings, so he is the value piece over on Tampa. I don't mind.
I'll just tell you the way that I've gone as far as the wide receivers with the Rams, and I play my cash on FanDuel and the GPPs, mostly on the others on DK. Cooper Kupp, Kupp gets a steady amount of targets. He looks to him more than anybody else. He looks to him in the end zone. Cooper Kupp is just a stud. And I think if you're going to pair him up, depending on the game, to me, the guy I'm pairing him up with just about every week is going to be Cooper Kupp. No matter what the matchup is. And I think the Rams offense, a big problem with this, though, is the lack of run game. Last year they could use Gurley. They could run Gurley out there and let him touch the ball 25, 30 times a game. Can't do that now. They're going to have to readjust their offense. So I think they're going through a couple of growing pains there. So, Kevin, 50. The total here is 50. Do you trust the Rams offense enough to put up enough points to where Tampa Bay can actually get and cover this, maybe a backdoor cover in garbage time?
I don't think this is going to eclipse 50.
You would think that it could, just because the Buccaneers, we saw how they melted down a bit last week. But the Rams' last 5 games, including the playoffs, total of 50 or more. They've gone under 4 times. So we'll see how that, if that trend continues. And like, Dan has mentioned about the Rams defense, they've been very good so far. And you can't really dispute that over the past few weeks. And obviously the X factor here is Jameis, that as long as he doesn't turn the ball over and he can keep Tampa Bay in this game and not give the Rams a short field with any bad throws, then Tampa Bay can definitely hang in this game. But as far as the Rams go, I know that we can say they're going to bust out sooner or later, but, we're still waiting for that. And I think, coming back home to play a Tampa team that you could overlook just because the Buccaneers right now are 1-2. And, you can look at Tampa. I'm not trying to pump them up, but the 49ers game was right there. Jameis made a couple bad throws for pick sixes, and they played San Francisco tough. They beat Carolina week 2, and they should have beat the Giants week 3. So I think that this Tampa team isn't as bad as people think, and it's just a ton of points. It really is, where the Buccaneers could hang even within a touchdown of this game.
Wow. Again, I don't buy into the always the letdown thing. It's just something, unless there's a statistic there that, hey, after the win against this team, I can't buy into the letdown thing. But I see what you're saying. I mean, the Rams have a really good defense. I think it's something that gets overlooked. I thought they had a great game in the Super Bowl too. So people say, oh, it's just an offensive team. Like, they're going through growing pains offensively. I think they're trying to change the identity, or they're either that or they're still trying to get the run game going. So This is a total I'm staying away from. This is actually a game I'm staying away from. This is a game that I'll be playing in DFS, Dan, because I do think there's a couple of spots there. If you had your choice, though, which quarterback would you go with? Which wide receiver would be your number one priority?
Definitely Goff. I don't see me playing too much Jameis. I kind of agree with you on the Cup pair-up, but I do kind of believe that this could be a Godwin spot here to get those garbage time receptions. His salary plummeted after that game last week, or maybe Mike Evans' salary just went crazy. But, he's back to be the cheaper wide receiver, and I don't mind him in these situations where they're playing catch-up and the defense is sagging off, playing some prevent. We saw last week that Evans was the downfield threat, but Godwin should be the volume guy. I think there could be some volume if they're trailing. So he's the preferred probably wide receiver.
Hold on. One more note really quick. The Rams play at Seattle coming up Thursday. So just putting that out there that talk about the letdown, go to Cleveland, come home for Tampa Bay. Now they go to Seattle for their first divisional game. So you kind of wonder there, obviously these will be the two teams, and I know San Francisco's 3-0, but these are the two teams probably fighting it out for the division. So just another point there that, if we don't see a great effort from the Rams this week.
Are you taking that into account for the position you're taking on the game?
Yeah, just because, and I think it's just a lot of points where people will look at Tampa Bay and say, that, they're not really that good because they lost to a rookie quarterback, but maybe Daniel Jones is good. I know it's only a one-game sample size, so you can't go to Daniel Jones is now going to be a Hall of Famer because of one good game. But also I say they're 28-10 in that game. They missed a few kicks. That game was in the bag. And that's where I just look at perception now, what the Rams did to Cleveland. Maybe Cleveland's not as good as we thought they were with all the hype in the preseason and the offseason. So just trying to put that all together. But just to put that note that now you got a quick turnaround with Seattle coming up on Thursday on the road, that maybe this is let's get through this one because Thursday's more important.
All right, let's move on to Dallas at New Orleans. Now, this is not on the main slate. This is a Sunday night game. Maybe you play Thursday through Monday. Maybe you play all day through the night on Sunday, or you just play a short slate or your showdowns in DFS on Sunday night. But K-Raj, let's start with you on the totals here. On what's going on. Dallas at New Orleans. This is going to be a ratings bonanza if New Orleans can hang in here, and it's a great game from start to finish. We saw what Teddy Bridgewater could do last week. He finally got Michael Thomas going. I think they finally got Alvin Kamara going, which is the most important thing. And to go on the road and win that game in Seattle is really damn impressive. Dallas given 1.5 to open. Now it's 2.5. The line is Dallas minus 2.5. The total opened at 45. Now I'm seeing it at 46.5, 47. Let's start with the game. Let's start with the spread here. It's 1.5, 2. Where do you see this line ending up, and which side are you on?
I mean, it's really hard to deny what the Cowboys have done so far. 3-0 straight up, 3-0 against the spread, but they've beaten the Giants. They've beaten the Redskins. They beat the Dolphins. So they haven't, knocked off really great competition. They've been impressive. You can't take that away. But also they've beaten three teams that right now are three of the worst teams in the NFL. Now you go to New Orleans. This is a rematch from last year. I think you guys remember this Thursday night game in Dallas late in the season. The Cowboys won 13-10, in which Dallas was a 7-point underdog at home. No Drew Brees. I get it now this time around. But now Dallas is a favorite at the Superdome, where New Orleans isn't an underdog that often. And the Saints have, I'm sure, some momentum off that win at Seattle. Holden, you mentioned Kamara, 160 all-purpose yards last week, so he's back in the fold. I don't think they're asking Bridgewater to do what Drew Brees does. Just don't make mistakes out there. And Dallas comes into this game, the notes on them. Sunday Night Football last year went 2-0 straight up and 3-0 against the spread. The one really good victory they had was at Philadelphia late in the season. So that one, we'll put out there that Dallas, obviously not afraid of the spotlight. We know that with them over the years. But the Saints last year, one time as a home dog against the Rams in the regular season. That wild game they played, 45-35. The late touchdown pass from Brees to Michael Thomas that opened it up after the Rams came back. They were in a huge hole. And the Saints ended up winning as a 1.5-point dog. But as far as this goes, yes, I agree. It's hard to, put down Dallas for their schedule. But at the same time, though, they have been very impressive. You have the better quarterback on Dallas right now. Probably, the offensive weapons, you still have Zeke on Dallas. You still have Amari Cooper. The Saints, it's just about getting those guys involved again. The guys on Dallas will be involved. It's about, can Bridgewater keep Kamara and Michael Thomas involved? I'd probably lean Dallas right now, even though we've seen the favorites do well the last few weeks in prime time. But it's just hard to see the Saints after that win against Seattle, where everything kind of broke for them, to see this happen again against a really good team.
All right, Dan, this is going to be an interesting game from a DFS perspective, because normally the Saints blow up at home and they don't score as much on the road. That's with Drew Brees. Teddy Bridgewater's there. How do you think that affects the players on the New Orleans side of things? Then you got the Dallas side of things. We're seeing where Dallas is getting out to big leads, and Tony Pollard's come in. That's affected a little bit of the workload of Zeke Elliott. Amari Cooper is now blossoming into a superstar. Same thing with Dak Prescott. This, to me, is going to be one of the tougher decisions of the week.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the single game / what we call showdown kind of game theory for some people who might be watching on the VI side of things and aren't familiar with it. It's basically just single game fantasy. You've got your 5 spots, and then one of them is your captain spot, where you get 1.5x value on that player. And the important thing about playing these type of slates is you actually want to tell a story with your lineup. You just, it's not just haphazardly, throwing, quote unquote, throwing the best players in and making it work. You're never going to win a tournament by zeroing out an optimal lineup. And if you do, you're going to share it with like 5,000 of your closest friends. So it's not very fun. The key is trying to build unique lineups and tell a story through those lineups. And the number one way to do that is leaving salary on the table. Do not even worry about salary cap when you're talking about these showdown lineups. It shouldn't even matter. The main thing is make sure you don't zero out lineups, because somebody else will have that lineup if you do it. But just a couple of notes here about this game too. Alvin Kamara last week, he had negative air yards, which you'd say he's a running back. What do you expect, Dan? He finished with 92 receiving yards. So he legitimately did all of that himself. Absolutely unheard of. And I think he's a guy that you're just going to lock in your lineups. Could you put him in captain spot? Absolutely, especially on DraftKings, where you get that full point PPR. Last week, it was Cooper and Dak. That was the combo. That was the winner. I actually like Zeke this week to grind it out a little bit more. Like Kevin mentioned last year, this is a pretty low, scoring game. So I think we'll see it again. But I want to talk about a crazy sleeper here, especially in the showdown format. And that's Taysom Hill, running back or quarterback for New Orleans. And I'm going to tell you why here. You would never play it on a full slate where you have to roster a quarterback. Well, in showdown format, you can roster whatever position you want. There are no positional requirements. So it doesn't really take that much away from you to be able to roster Taysom Hill and look at him as like a running back or a wide receiver. And we know that this guy is in on goal line situations. We know that Sean Payton has a crazy playbook. And we also know that most people are not going to press that button. So you're going to get a guy in a single game format that has minuscule ownership. Obviously, if you're playing any sort of 50-50s or cash games, you're not going this route. But in a tournament where you got to beat 100,000 other people and you only got a limited number of player pool to choose from, I don't hate it this week. If he scores a touchdown, you're going to be looking pretty good.
Yeah, maybe he's more involved in the offense too. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Teddy was in there. I mean, Teddy was the quarterback. I thought Hill would be more involved at more than one position, tell you the truth, and it just didn't work over there. And on the Dallas side, I mean, if you wanted a sleeper there, last week everybody was on Devin Smith, right? Now no one's talking about Devin Smith. Devin Smith is a guy that could, I think more on FanDuel, I think he's going to be more touchdown dependent than anything else. But if you're doing a showdown slate there, maybe that's a way to go on the Dallas side. You don't think it's that high of a scoring game, Dan? I don't want to put words on your mouth, but that's
I don't think so. I mean, Bridgewater, like Kevin mentioned, he was a game manager, and I feel like we kind of blew that game. I don't know if we talked about it. I don't think we did, but we should have known that with an extra week of practice, he was going to look a lot better than when he did coming off the bench in that situation. You're just so much more prepared when you can be a part of the game plan. You do the walkthroughs, you're practicing with the ones. And I don't think we accounted for that nearly as much as we should have. Bridgewater was not a stiff in this league. And I just think he was unprepared when he came in last time, randomly when Breeze got hurt. So I feel like we should have looked at that perspective and realized a week of practice for him was going to do him a lot better. And it certainly did last week. So he's fine, but he's also a guy that I don't think presents a ton of upside. He doesn't run the ball all that much. And he's just got other weapons to give it to. And if they get to the goal line again, it could be Hill coming in there, playing some quarterback and running one in. So, not too interested in Bridgewater, but, fine for a real life quarterback.
Line open at 45. Now it's sitting at 46.5, 47 as we tape this on Tuesday, K-Raj. You're not going to see totals opening at 45 very often at games in a Superdome. That being said, no Drew Brees. That being said, Teddy Bridgewater looked a lot better. Kamara, Michael Thomas getting involved there. Over, under.
I'd probably lean over for a couple reasons. That you don't, like you said, Holden, you don't get the low total like that at the Superdome. Normally these numbers are 50 and above. And in the few times, granted, the last two seasons where you've seen less than 50, these games have gone over. And that did include Week 17 against Carolina last year where Breeze didn't play and New Orleans had it all locked up. And they lost at home to Carolina. They got blown out, but that went over the total. And yes, you have to take into account it was 13-10 last year, but also there was a goal line stand that the Cowboys made on the Saints, and there were some opportunities there in that one to maybe be a little not go over the total in Dallas, but at least to be a little more high scoring. But I think that New Orleans here, back at home, that with Bridgewater, if he could make a big play or two, you still have studs on the offensive side. And also, Dallas's defense has been good, but Dallas's defense has been good against three bums already, against the Giants, the Redskins, and the Dolphins. So that you can't necessarily take away when you go from them to even a backup in Bridgewater, but Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas and guys that are all pros on the offensive side in a hostile environment. We know the Cowboys can score, and if both teams could get into even the mid-20s, I don't think it's that crazy. So I look at it as you might as well take advantage of getting this low of a total when you can at the Superdome.
But if it gets much higher than 46.5, 47, I mean, where's the line?
I don't think it's going to go higher than, let's say 40, maybe 48. It's a Sunday night game, so people want the over, and
Dallas fans. I mean, that makes a big difference too.
Well, the other point is that heading into Week 4, we've seen two overs in primetime games. One of them was Houston-New Orleans Week 1, which should have stayed under. And the second one was the Monday night game with Chicago and Washington, where you had the Redskins score late. The Bears had a defensive touchdown in that game, and that should have stayed under too. So you're kind of waiting for that big over, that never in doubt over in a primetime game. So that's kind of, you wonder if this could be the one on Sunday night.
Well, here's the one game that I'm more excited to watch this weekend than anything else. And you go back to Kansas City right now. Kansas City is on the road. They are 6-point favorites. You've got a total here around 53.5, 54. I mean, it's basically stayed steady, maybe moved up a half a point here. This is DFS goodness. From a betting perspective, though, Kansas City -6 against the Detroit team, trying to win different ways. Matt Stafford, let me just say one thing about Matt Stafford, very efficient. He's not turning the ball over as much. I'm still not sold in their run game, but they do have a couple of nice wide receivers to go to. Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay, he's got some weapons there. The question is, can anybody stop the most talented quarterback in the league? They're without their most explosive offensive player in Tyreek Hill. And then what do? They call up a rookie who's every bit as explosive, Mecole Hardman. There's just so many weapons there. We actually saw the Chiefs defense do a hell of a job against the Ravens. So Kansas City, normally 6-point favorites on the road. You got a double take on this, but boy, this team's almost unstoppable right now.
Yeah, Holden, it's tough to really get in the way of this Chiefs team and the way Mahomes has played and the second quarter numbers, what they did, 28 points against Oakland, 23 against Baltimore this past week. Mahomes, I mean, we know his numbers and what he's able to do. But when you look at Detroit's side of things, you know what? 2-0-1. Give Matt Patricia credit. I mean, they should be 3-0. They should have won the Arizona game. But also, the Charger game, the Chargers kind of gave that one away. And
don't poo-poo that. They got this is a horrible franchise.
He's
fumbled
still
on the one,
loss for his picks. I know.
goals.
I can see it.
Oh,
They gave away that game.
Guys, 2-0-1.
Patricia, I mean, look a little more like a head coach. Clean yourself up a little bit. Anyway, but with this Lions team, look, you can't take away what they've done. Going to Philadelphia, that's a great win for them. Beating the Eagles, the Chargers are a playoff team from last year, so yes, those are two good wins. The Cardinal game is obviously still in question because they were great for 3 quarters and then stunk in the 4th quarter in overtime. But Detroit, when you look at the running game, it's not great. They had a 40-yard run, in fact, against Philadelphia, and the rest of it, I think, was 40-something yards. They got the rest of of that game on Sunday. But Detroit, all 3 games, guys, decided by 3 points. Exactly. So you wonder now, is this going to be all right, we've been living on the edge the last few weeks. We're facing the MVP and Pat Mahomes and all the weapons he brings in inside. There's no weather to deal with. That Kansas City, we've seen them pull these blowouts off on the road, not just at Arrowhead. The only note I'll give you, say what you will about it, but it's just a silly trend that the Chiefs last 2 years on the road against NFC teams are 0-4. So we'll give you that one. Against the Rams, they lost last year, that 54-51 game, and lost at Seattle in Week 16 on a Sunday night. So those are 2 with Mahomes. The previous 2 are with Alex Smith. So just to put that out there, that's the only negative on Kansas City. But it's hard to make a case against the Chiefs right now.
Yeah, I was really upset that I teased that game up to 110 total last year. Just felt like 5 points short. That was one of the great games you're ever going to see from an offensive perspective. Fantasy perspective, daily fantasy perspective. It's, every week it's a cornucopia of goodness. You just have to figure out, Dan, and I wonder how you do this, which wide receiver from the Chiefs you want. Is it Watkins that's going to blow up? Is it Robinson? Is it Hardman? Last week, nobody seemed to be on LaShawn McCoy. He stumbled into the end zone. He made a nice grab because he's not even healthy. His ankle's bothering me. Left the last game too. Let's start with the Chiefs side and then get to the Detroit side. But how do you approach this with Kansas City? Because Mahomes right now, he's just unstoppable.
Well, I know Kevin's the betting guy, but I got to give a take on this one too. I think Detroit covers his 6. I think this line, it stinks, man. I mean, honestly, Kansas City not even getting a touchdown against Detroit. I mean, it doesn't really add up. And when it doesn't add up, you kind of dig a little bit deeper. And if you look at that game last week, especially from fantasy perspective, none of the receivers really made it. I mean, Hardman, yeah, he had that long touchdown, but that was it. That's all he got. DeMarcus Robinson, he had that one touchdown, but still only like 40 yards. Watkins peppered, but still didn't even reach 90 yards receiving. And then Kelsey, of course, got yardage, but didn't get anything in the end zone. So it is truly a roulette wheel here for Kansas City on their offense. Mahomes, you can just play him by himself. His floor is 300 yards and 3 touchdowns most weeks. But I do have some respect here for this defense of Detroit. And I am not interested in playing Shady McCoy. Maybe if Damian Williams is out again, you could consider it because you got to think he's going to be a little bit healthier than he was last week. But that's a tough D-line. So I think Detroit comes to play here. And here's the note that you got to look at, too. Guess what defense allows the most yards per carry this season?
Kansas City.
It's Kansas City. 6.2 yards per carry is what they are allowing on the ground here. I think that really bodes well for Detroit, who doesn't really want to pass the ball all that much. If you look at those games that they were in, kind of had to come from behind in those games. And against Arizona, everybody's going to throw the ball just because you kind of can. But I think Kerryon Johnson is one of the sharper plays on this slate. You look at last week, was in for 75% of snaps. That was up from 57 and 55 the last 2 weeks. And there was a reason for it. C.J. Anderson got dumped. So they got rid of him and realized, let's just give our best running back the ball. And he was productive. So I love his salary this week, only $5,400 on DraftKings. 6,500 on FanDuel. I think he's a cash game play. And especially when you look at that defense against the run, he's a guy that I think I'm going to be jamming into my lineups. Not really interested in Stafford. Galladay is fine. He's had 8, 10, and 9 targets in his 3 games. He's 5,900 on DraftKings, so he's the preferred wide receiver. And if you want to get super sneaky, Hawkinson, he's been a dog the last 2 weeks. Obviously, just 8 in that cake matchup against Arizona, but I think he could get off the schneid here. He's only 3.3, so if you want to stack up Kansas City and run it back with somebody cheap, he might be an option for you.
All right, guys. Last game that we got on our list as of right now will be Philadelphia Green Bay. Watched a lot of that Philadelphia game. I mean, their offense, they can't do anything in the first quarter. They laid an egg again. First half, garbage. They're playing catch up. Carson Wentz just keeps trying to run and take his own head off. They're going to Green Bay. I mean, this is a much improved defensive team. This, to me, is why Green Bay has been so good. And LaFleur last week said, I want to get more of a 50-50 timeshare. He had been saying that since the preseason, but here's the deal. He got a 50-50 timeshare last week with the touches. So Green Bay offensively, different offense now, not quite as explosive. Defensively, much, much better. K-Raj, Green Bay -3. Now it's -4.5 against the Eagles. Thoughts on that one? Yeah, by the way, a lot of injuries in that secondary too. So if Aaron Rodgers does decide to throw this week, this is the week to pick on him.
Yeah, the Eagles are beat up, and Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. We'll see what happens if they play or not on Thursday. But this Philadelphia team we thought would be a Super Bowl contender. I know it's only 3 weeks in, but right now 1-2, and they had to come back against the Redskins in week 1 from a 17-0 deficit. There's 3 teams in the NFL, guys, that have not covered a game yet this season. You know who they are?
Well, one of the teams we're doing right now, maybe both of them, Philly, Green Bay, I don't know. Who?
Philadelphia's 1, Miami's 2, and the Chargers are 3 because they pushed in week 1. So you have 3 teams that have not covered yet, and the Eagles – though they are an underdog for the first time this year. So you do get points with them, if that means anything. But just to put this, a couple notes, that Philadelphia last year, 3-2 against the spread as an underdog. Now, both the losses came with Carson Wentz as the starting quarterback because the 3 covers came with Nick Foles as the starting quarterback. So with Wentz, it kind of feels like at times that I don't want to compare him to Kirk Cousins. I don't want to go there, but I feel like he's a guy that will beat the bad teams, but then when he's playing better teams, he's not getting those wins. So it's a tough situation here going to Lambeau Field. Green Bay's defense has been fantastic. Already 2 wins out of the chute against the NFC North, against Chicago and against Minnesota. And they had a letdown spot against Denver, and they did not let down, and they won that game. Green Bay has Dallas coming up in week 5. So this is a very big game for the Packers to jump out to a 4-0 start. And Chicago plays Minnesota on Sunday. So one of those teams, assuming there's no tie, will be 2-2. So the Packers can jump out to a 2-game lead over one of those 2 and has beaten one of them already. I just think that with Philadelphia and the issues they've had so far, even getting the points, it's kind of tough to back. We might as well keep riding Green Bay for what they've done so far this season.
Hey, Dan, before we get to, all the I think the wide receiver position will be very interesting, but what are we doing with Aaron Rodgers now? Because Aaron Rodgers is not putting up 350 yards with another 55 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns a game. Do we need to change our expectations, or at a GPP, is he still a guy that now people are sleeping on, and this is the week to go after him because he's going up against Philadelphia's secondary, which has been a sieve?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at those matchups. Chicago, arguably the best defense in football. Minnesota, very defensive, slow-paced team. In Denver, the one thing they do well is they've got some top corners there. So they've really faced 3 good pass defenses this season, and I think this is a complete smash spot for maybe not Rodgers per se, but Davante Adams, boys and girls. This guy is going to score a touchdown. He's gone 3 games this year have not scored. He only didn't score in 4 games all of last season. I think it was around 13 touchdowns. So that variance is going to swing his way. That secondary is completely beat up for Philadelphia. We saw what Julio Jones did to them as a top-flight wide receiver a couple of weeks ago. And I think Devontae Adams gets it done this week. So he is my key play. And I think this is, it's weird because Thursday, people always play too many guys on the Thursday through Sunday games. But I think this is a spot where if I am playing that slate, I really like the Green Bay side. And I don't think you're doing it wrong here. Even though the ownership might be higher than it should be, I think Adams and Aaron Rodgers, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we got multiple touchdowns for just that combination in this game. So I love those guys. Aaron Jones, 3 touchdowns, but, pretty lousy 3.8 yards per carry. So I don't think I'm looking to go there. And on the Philly side, again, if Adams and Rodgers do go off, it could just kind of be a back and forth kind of air attack game. And Zach Ertz, he's another guy who has not scored a touchdown yet this season, and he's had 8 over each of the last 2 seasons. So again, more variance that should swing his way. The targets are certainly still there. I think 11 and 12. Actually, those were the Aguilar targets each of the last 2 weeks. So again, keep your eye on Jackson and Alshon News. If they're out, Aguilar's another guy we can go to. But I think Ertz is another one who kind of lives up to the preseason hype. A lot of fantasy guys this year are crushing these season-long teams. I know people are ready to kind of bail on them. Don't bail. It's just a matter of time. And I think for Ertz and for Adams this week, both those guys find the end zone.
Well, the thing that was concerning last week, and it was a legit game time decision, Dallas Goedert went out there and Wentz threw to him, and Goddard just dropped the ball.
Hey, he dropped it. Like,
had a touchdown.
Throw to that guy, okay?
Right. Yeah, stop doing that. So that's a little concerning. But let's talk about those wide receivers. Alshon is at least getting in a little bit of work this week. There's been reports he'll be gone because they don't want to have him on a quick turnaround on Thursday. Let's assume he plays. Magically he plays. Deshaun Jackson's not playing. I mean, the guy has an ab injury. There's no way they're playing him on a short week. What does that do to Aguilar then? Because Aguilar he was the main play. He was a free square last week. Price up a little bit more. Is he viable if Alshon Jeffrey is out on the field? Or maybe does it even help because Jeffrey could be a decoy?
Yeah, I think he's probably viable either way because I don't think Jackson's going to go. And Arcega-Whiteside was the guy I was kind of high on, and he dropped a couple passes himself there. So I think he's viable, but I also think some people will probably go to him after having the big week as heavy chalk last week. And that's why I'm like a little more interested in Ertz too, because the secondary for the Green Bay Packers has been really, really good this year. I mean, this Packers defense is first in turnovers and I think second in like total defense this year. So they've been much improved, but I also think the pace of this game is going to be much different than they've seen up to this point. And I think, if I'm betting this game, the side I like is the over 45. I think we see some points. A lot of times Thursday night is ugly. And we don't have a lot of scoring. I think this one's going to be ugly, but with a lot of scoring. So I think people will take back some of those bad words about Thursday night football this week, and I think we go over 45 here.
Yeah, I was actually considering playing a nice Thursday through Sunday slate or Thursday through Monday slate because I do actually think that Aaron Rodgers, even though people are going to get in on that Thursday, this could be a situation where he finally throws for the 3 touchdowns. K-Raj, it opened at 48. It's down to 45 now. I think, is this Sharps pushing the line down? Is this people just looking at it and saying it's Thursday night football? Why is this line drop so dramatically?
Well, I mean, we're also seeing too, the point that I made earlier that the primetime games, we've seen low-scoring games. And granted, take away Chicago, Washington with that over, that we're just not getting them in these Thursday games. But also, look at the last 2 Thursday games. Who have you had? Tennessee, Jacksonville, and you've had Tampa Bay, Carolina. So not exactly sexy teams. And in week 1 with Green Bay, Chicago, it was a grinded-out game, week 1, so we can give them a break. But the last 2 weeks, you don't have offensively minded teams necessarily. So now with Green Bay, you're just hoping that this is the bust-out game for Aaron Rodgers, that he can do that against this Philadelphia defense, and we'll see what Carson Wentz can do. Obviously, the receivers being out doesn't help Wentz at all, but still, Green Bay has the potential to score in the high 20s. We know what Philadelphia has been able to do, at least in some of these early games, and they busted out in the Washington game. Granted, those guys were healthy, but Philadelphia is more than capable of scoring at least 3 touchdowns in this game. It's just about, can they keep up with Green Bay? So I think that try to take advantage of it, that maybe we'll see these primetime overs start to turn around.
I'm actually looking forward to this game just because it is Green Bay and Philadelphia. Green Bay looks like a legit contender. Philadelphia thinks they're a legit contender, but they have just looked horrible. They even maybe look at the first quarter total because the Eagles just can't score. It's amazing. They come out and just get shut down every single game. So you're leaning toward the under a little bit, over. It kind of sounded like you were saying a little bit over, but you're not completely.
I'd lean over. I don't love it, but just for our purposes, I'd lean that way. But a lean is as far as I'm going.
Dan, it kind of sounds like you're looking at the under, right?
No, over. Definitely over. I like the over in this.
Completely opposite of what I said.
Yeah, I think we see more points here. And Valdez-Scantling, by the way, same number of targets as Devontae Adams this season. So, play both of those guys if you really want to stack that game up. But, I think we see some fireworks on Thursday finally.
Valdez-Scantling was so frustrated first couple of weeks of the season. Then he blows up. And where's Jimmy Graham? Is Jimmy Graham even an option anymore?
He's old.
That's old. That's what it is. All right, guys. Last words. Dan Bach, anything?
Yeah, check us out, rotogrinders.com, sharpside.com. Again, we've got our Vegas Insider sponsored contest on the Sharpside app. If you haven't downloaded it, it's free and it's free to play. And basically, you can go and track your wagers just by swiping. It's a lot of fun. We've got all the different sports available, and of course, our NFL contest. $10,000 is what we're giving away with weekly winners, half season winners, and of course, $5,000 at the end. And you can bet on every NFL game, totals and lines. So even if you've fallen behind, you can catch up real quick if you get hot in a couple of weeks. So leaderboards, check it out. A lot of fun. And of course, RotoGrinders, if you are already playing DFS, hopefully you know about us. If you don't, do go over there. And we just launched a new tool called Gridiron IQ.
Love it. Dude, it's an amazing tool. Seriously. And I'm not just saying that. I was using it all last week and it helped.
Yeah, and it's actually really useful even for a betting side of things, because it's literally just every statistical number you could want in a matchup. And I think it's very useful, especially if you want to get into the betting of props, because we basically have the props next to our projections for said player. So you can see where our projections really differ from, whatever sports book you're using. So check it out. Again, it's rotogrinders.com.
K-Raj, you just want to duck your head so we can see that amazing banner behind you? There you go. VegasInsider.com. Rogers is on a roll. It's amazing to see what you're doing there, K-Raj. Good job, buddy.
Thank you.
VegasInsider.com. Live odds, sports picks, everything else. He's got his guarantees. If you don't cover, then they give you money back. So it's wonderful. And there's 4 different balls on there. So it's really great.
He actually lives in like the most beautiful place out of all of us, and we've got
Boca
banners in the background.
Where do you live, Boca? What do you mean it's the most gorgeous place?
Hey, you live right on the beach down there, right? Like
yes, I'm right on the beach.
Just wait till the hurricane comes. You'll be living right in the ocean. You guys in Florida, my gosh.
Come to the mountains. Beautiful here for the next 7 months, Holden. So.
Come to the mountains, boys. Come to the mountains. You can deal with a few blizzards. Real quick, I'll be taping the RotoGrinder Sports Betting Podcast with Robert Walker. He used to be the odds maker at the Mirage in Vegas, and now he runs U.S. bookmaking. And you talked about props. They come up with their props, and I just exploit them, and then they ended up it's early week, but we talk about player props, and they go head-to-head with some guys. So it's actually a lot of fun. RotoGrinder Sports Betting Podcast. We'll drop that tomorrow. We tape tonight, drop it tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter, @HoldItRadio. For Dan Bach and Kevin Rogers and Devin back in the Nashville studios. Good luck this week, everybody.